Hey, I'm Blake Bartlett, and we're here today to talk about the new customer journey. I'm a partner over at OpenView, a venture capital firm in Boston that invests exclusively in enterprise software companies and has a big push and emphasis and thesis around product-led growth. So with that, let's dive in. I want to set up this dichotomy effectively of the old world and the new world and look at a number of factors and see kind of in basically the pre-product led world, and then in the current world, the product led world, how have different dynamics shifted? And then what does that indicate to us in terms of what this new customer journey will be and how we adapt to it? So the first thing to highlight here is buying power. And now this shouldn't be rocket science, is that in the old world, it was a top-down model. We've heard that word many times, but top-down really meant that you sold to the executive or the boss, the person who had the purchasing and the buying power, because that was the only way to get software into a team, was to go to the VP or the C-level person who ran that team. But in the new world, it's very much inverted, right? The bottoms up dynamic that people refer to often. And so if you want to get a tool into an organization today, there is no longer only one means to do that, right? And that one means used to be to the executive. Now you can go to the end users themselves. Another thing to call out is the customer definition, or the definition of a customer in the old world versus the new world. Now in the old world, you see here that this really meant an account, right? There was no way to get piecemeal into an organization. You either had a contract or you didn't. It was binary, and you really cared about landing that account, getting the champion who represents that account, usually an executive, as we talked about before, etc. Now today, in this productized or this product-led world, a dynamic that I think we see often is that I call it the atomization of software usage and software adoption. So no longer do you have to go get the entirety of an account or the entirety of an organization. You can get a single user. And then you can turn that into 2 users. You can turn that into 10 users. And at some point, you do have penetration into an account. And at some point, you will sort of put a contract around it, a formal contract, an invoice, and all that kind of stuff. And there will be an account manager. But you start by getting individual end users. The next thing from definition of customer is the person who's at that customer who does the stuff, right? Because humans can buy things and faceless entities cannot. So within this customer, again, in the old world, it's all about the account. The account is controlled by, or the buying power for the account is controlled by the executive. And so that means that you build the product for that same persona. And then in the new world, it very much is no longer the executive. We've talked about this before. It's the end user. It's that individual person. And then product value, I started to indicate it at this a little bit. In the old world, it's all about ROI. But product value in the new world, again, because it's about the end user, right? And so the product value, when you're building for the end user, at least the starting point, is not an ROI calculator-oriented product value. It's not a KPI uplift-oriented product value. Instead, it's more of a pain relief, annoyance relief oriented product value. So there are 2 personas you have to keep in mind. There's the product persona, who are you building for and whose pain are you relieving? And then how do you get that product that you've now built into the organization that you're targeting, right? Back to that customer definition. Not rocket science here. It's the executive and it's the end user. You got it right. It's the same person. And this is important because I think that some people these days, when they're trying to move to the new world, when they're trying to adopt and embrace product-led, they only go halfway. They keep the old product, or they keep the old mantra and mindset for how products were built in this category before, and then they try to distribute it to the end user, right? So you have an executive-oriented product trying to be distributed to an end user. Back to that sales example, you've built something for the VP of sales, but you're trying to distribute it on a self-service basis to an individual SDR. Sometimes they might have overlap and see value in the same thing, but oftentimes they speak different languages. Their day-to-day is completely different. The pain that they have, the annoyance that they have, the ROI they care about is completely different. And so if you're gonna go from the old world to the new world, you have to go all the way. And you have to build for the end user and distribute to the end user. That product persona, that distribution persona is one and the same. The next up in distribution is the distribution model. So in the old world, this is what we typically think of as being SaaS distribution or SaaS go-to-market, right? It's inbound marketing fueling inside sales. And the distribution model in the new world again, for the distribution persona of the end user, looks a lot more like consumer-oriented growth models, right? And I put the shopping cart here because it looks a lot more like e-commerce, or signing up for a subscription service like Spotify or Netflix as an individual person than it does buying enterprise software. And then this is the last sort of juxtaposition that I'll highlight here, and then we'll get into some more details of how do I do this. And this is the distribution goal. And so in the old world, the distribution goal oftentimes was qualification. And in the new world, I think we can all recognize that the goal is time to value. And people have talked about time to value for a while, but time to value, the clock truly is ticking when you get an individual user signed up, right? Because individual users, one thing they don't have is patience. One thing they do have is instant gratification needs, right? Again, think about it through not signing up for business software, but signing up for Spotify or Netflix or something like that. So you see how those two things could be at odds: deep inspection, deep qualification versus time and speed. And this is exactly why we have to set up this juxtaposition, because there's a lot of times mixed metaphors. A lot of the old world stuff comes in the new world, and it starts to taint and really doesn't allow the new world and the new model of product-led to flourish. So with that, as the appropriate backdrop, let's talk about the old journey from a few different perspectives, and then we'll talk about the new journey so you can just see side by side what that looks like. So we're going to start with the old journey from the customer's perspective. And again, back to the definition of the customer, it's an account and it's an executive buyer. And so that's whose eyes we're looking through, that executive who owns budget, who is the buyer at the account, et cetera. And so that journey looks like I'm going to research first, then you move to evaluation. And this is kind of where you start to get on the phone with people, asking a ton of different questions. You're starting to see things for the first time and you're getting better qualified yourself, right? And then we move into the period of negotiation. And this is like the true crux and final mile of the sales side of things. And then after you get the closed one, well, it's closed one from the vendor's perspective. After you have signed the contract and you have executed the PO, now you don't start using the software immediately because you have to configure the software, you have to implement it, you have to set it up, you have to get it ready for your environment, for your use case, et cetera. And then, it could be a month later, it could be a few months later, the users start using it, right? And so that's kind of the customer journey. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens after that in order to make sure that they're successful and whatnot, but that really is how things go. So that's from the customer's perspective. Again, from the executive buyer's perspective at an account. From the vendor's perspective, this is you as the software company trying to adapt to the journey that the user or the buyer is going through. First step is to educate the buyer because they're doing research. As the buyer is evaluating your product, you are qualifying them. And then it goes into, okay, great, they are in my ICP. I do want to close them. Let's get them done this month or this quarter, right? You're getting to that cadence of, fast, high velocity sales. And the goal is to get the closed one, to get the gong. And then you go from the sales rep into the CSM typically, or a services organization who's going to be implementing the account. And then it becomes the impetus of customer success or of account management to retain the account, right? So that's the journey from the vendor's perspective. Now, the last perspective I want to bring in is the org design perspective. Effectively, who is doing these jobs? Who is doing these tasks in the journey from the vendor's perspective? And so to start, because the buyer is doing research, you're educating the buyer, and that is content marketing and demand gen. And then as they're evaluating and you're qualifying the buyer, that tends to be sales development, SDRs, and maybe the beginning stages of the AE journey as well, the AE sort of set section of the funnel. Then you move into the buyers negotiating, trying to get the best product at the best price and as many bells and whistles as they can. You're trying to close and get the gong, get the closed one. And that's obviously the realm of the sales rep, of the AE themselves. And then we're moving into configuration, where I'm trying to get set up and you're implementing the account. Photo negatives or inverses of one another, obviously, and that is services, or maybe you call your services team today, or your implementation team, your onboarding team, maybe you call them customer success, maybe it's a sub-segment of customer success. But it's somebody that's kind of changing the knobs and the dials to get the things set up, importing the data, wiring up the integrations, all that kind of stuff. And then you're in to retain the account, as I said before, that's customer success or account management, right? So this should not really be anything surprising. This is how most SaaS goes to market today. So that's the world we're in today. That's the old journey. And then the new journey. So from the customer's perspective, again, the definition of the customer, it's not about the account. It's not about the executive buyer. It's not about unlocking that budget out of the gates. Instead, it's about getting the first user and then getting to a point where you have a collection of users. And that's how you build account penetration. So from the user's perspective, an individual person, it could be me, it could be you, it could be anybody off the street. What they do is they're looking to discover a product that solves that pain, that annoyance that they might have. And then you start. So you go instantly from discovery to sign me up. I need to start. I need to see what this thing is all about. And then you want to use the product, again, see what this thing is all about and get your hands on the software, see the screen, see the knobs, see the dials, do the thing that brought you here in the first place as fast as possible. And then if you've used it and you come out the other side and say, thumbs up, experiment successful, I like this product, I'm going to keep using it, I got value. Yes, you use it personally and you keep going on with that, but the next phase you kind of go into is sharing, right? And that might be like literally sharing, like word of mouth because you love this product so much. Or you might share by using the product, right? There are viral loops that are built into products. And then you move to standardize, right? Because you've been sharing internally at your company, you've been sharing externally with your ecosystem of people you work with, collaborate with, customers, partners, vendors, et cetera. And so now you're going to standardize like your personal workflow and probably your team's workflow on this product as well. So that's what the new customer journey looks like from the user's perspective. It's very different from the account-oriented buyer perspective from the old journey. Then we move into the vendor's perspective. Again, this is you as the software company from a go-to-market lens. What are you trying to do? So because of that discovery motion, you're trying to attract the user. It's kind of like trying to create a magnet more so than trying to create a content education engine for people who are in a considered purchase evaluation mode, which is the old world. And then, they're trying to get started. So you want to acquire that user and then you want to, that's a sign up effectively, get the sign up, right? And then you want to activate that user because they're trying to use the product. And so you want them to start using the product and see the value and have the aha moment. And that's what they're looking for. And so you're trying to get them activated. And then you move into growth loops, which is kind of a catch-all term of stuff that you can do in your product, in ancillary aspects of your product through marketing and whatnot, in order to sort of, in a natural way, support and amplify what the user is doing, which is sharing. And then really the goal from there is to expand usage, which is both the usage of that individual person as everybody sort of continuing to log in as a daily active user, weekly active user, monthly active user, whatever the right cadence is. Are they doing the new things? Are they consistently active and engaged? But then also is the usage expanding to address new use cases and new teams and external partners and like all that kind of stuff from this wide net that's being cast from the usage, from the growth loops, from the sharing, and from the evangelism that's happening kind of in this customer universe or this user universe, right? Now, lastly, the org design perspective. So who does what in this journey? So discovery or attracting user from the vendor's perspective, that's the realm of marketing and growth. Then starting or signing up and getting that sign up and getting acquired, that's the role of marketing and growth. Now using the product, trying to get the initial value, trying to activate the user from the vendor's perspective, that's the role of product and growth. Then moving into sharing and growth loops to amplify that, that's the role of product and growth. And then lastly, the standardization mode, where you're trying to expand usage and trying to capture more of the stuff going on around your sort of problem statement or your value area of the product that you've built within that account, that starts to become the realm of product and customer champions. Now, some of these words are a little bit, marketing, that means so many different things. But what I wanted to do here, and you'll also see that they're all coupled, right? It's marketing and growth, it's product and growth, it's product and customer champions, because one thing that we do see in the org design dynamic and trends for the product-led world is the rise of cross-functional. The rise of teams where marketing and growth have to collaborate together. Growth and product have to collaborate together. Growth and product and the customer champions all have to collaborate together because there aren't distinct stages where it's just like, well, this is an MQL and now it's an SQL and now it's a closed won account. Things are a little bit more fungible, right? And so it's a little bit more collaborative, cross-functional, and the Venn diagram definitely has a lot of overlaps here. And so I'm calling out two teams because of the natural need to have a hand-in-glove collaborative relationship, which is the ultimate thesis statement here and where I will wrap up, which is that in the old world, sales leads and product follows. And in the new world, product leads and sales follows. So very simple, but there's a lot in there, and the order of operations makes all the difference. And I hope that this has been helpful to unpack a little bit of this new customer journey and how to embrace the product-led movement and leave behind a lot of the baggage of the old world that needs to be left behind. So thanks so much, everyone, and hope you enjoy the rest of the Product-Led Summit.